2022 special session. We are in order. It looks as though we've got Supervisors or Vice Chairman Jeff Surdy and Supervisor Steve Miller attending telephonically. Is that correct? Maybe?
Vice
Jeff
Chairman.
Surdy's here.
Okay.
Supervisor Miller.
Supervisor Miller's here.
Everybody's here. All right. Item number 1 is discussion regarding the 2022 Pinal County primary and general election handling. And Ms. Ross, you're up.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, Supervisors, and staff. Virginia Ross, Elections Director. We have finished tabulating. The canvass has been completed. The next step is the potential, what we're seeing, automatic recount for 2 statewide races. And we received word that the Pinal County LNA test will be scheduled for December 6th. Apparently, we're the first county, and about 9:30 in the morning on the 6th. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Okay, are there any questions from the board? Supervisor Kavanaugh.
Thank you. For the benefit of the public, I know you've gone over it a couple of times. Could you describe just the LNA test that you're going to conduct in December?
So the county will have the logic and accuracy test for the 3 tabulators only. Since we're not going to be using the express votes for the recount, those will not be tested. So it will only be the tabulators. The Secretary of State should bring their own test deck of the 2 races that will be counted. We don't have any details. They are holding recount training this morning and tomorrow for the counties on what to expect for the recount, and we'll be attending that.
Any other questions from the board? Okay, thank you. I think we're good. Mr. Folkman. Let me push the play button here. Click, go.
Thank you, Chair, members of the board. Ken Faulkner, Pinal County Attorney. This is, at least prior to the canvass, which is the next item, the last sort of update to the board. So I just want to kind of recap a couple things so the board is fully aware of everything as they move into their decision to canvass. First, when we've been providing these sort of weekly updates or every board meeting updates, they've been at a very high level. We've repeatedly told the board that things went off very well, and they did go off very well. But I think it's important that the board be fully aware it wasn't perfect. 99.9, but not perfect. One of the issues that we did run into is when some voters, roughly about 100 voters, showed up to the actual polling site on the day of the election. When their name ran through the polling pad, it did not show them as a registered voter. What ended up happening is there was a programming error. However, we had 2 different redundancies that were put in place. The first one was there was actually a paper roster. So if their name didn't show up on the polling pad, they could go to the paper roster and go down. And if for whatever reason they weren't able to be found on the paper roster, they could call Ms. Lewis in her office at the recorder's office, and they could validate that, yes, in fact, they were registered voters. There's been this sort of murmur in the public that people were disenrolled as voters. That is not at all what happened. Again, we haven't identified why the poll pads were not perfect, but our 2 redundancies caught every one of those. Every person that showed up and was permitted to vote, was legally permitted to vote, was given the ability to vote. They were inconvenienced. They had to wait a couple extra minutes for a phone call. And those that were not legally permitted to vote were not allowed to vote in there. So while there was a small snafu, the reason we didn't bring it to the board earlier is because ultimately there was no negative impact. However, the public has been saying, hey, there's been some disenrollment and some other things, and I think it's important that the board be made aware that there was again, we're estimating about 100, no more than 150 people out of the 82,000 registered voters that issue occurred with. The second issue that we've been hearing a lot is, why did it take so stinking long? And I know this board's aware of it. This is really more for the public, but just because of the canvas coming up, I personally have received emails. I'm fairly confident some of you have received those same emails. Why does it take so long? Why is, for example, Ohio, where I'm from, they know everything the day of. How in the world does it take us a week to calculate that? What's important for this board to know and for the public to be aware of is we had, on the night of the election, our team stayed up till, 3, 4 in the morning. By the time they finished that day, almost every single early ballot that had been received by Friday at 5 p.m. the day before the election had been tabulated, and every day of vote had been tabulated and calculated. The issue is there are still ballots that are coming in Saturday, Monday, and then walk-in ballots. When those ballots come in, they have to go through a validation process. We have to make sure that the signatures are verified. We have to have 2 party members there. There's an entire process that it goes through it, and that's to ensure that we're not allowing somebody that should not be voting the ability to vote. So what happens is all of those day ofs, those Saturdays and those Monday ballots, there were quite a few, and it took quite a process to get that done. That's why it took so long. And there were also some provisionals. And those provisionals were those that filled out a ballot that there was something that didn't quite seem right, so that we allow them to vote, and then we validate after the fact. So we go through and we do all of the validation for those provisional votes. That's the reason the process takes so long. So as long as the state of Arizona and our legislature allows our laws to say, hey, you can drop off your early ballots the day of, you can mail them in, and as long as the post office has them by a certain time, they're going to be counted. It's going to continue to take about a week, give or take, to be able to calculate those. There's nothing nefarious going. It was a completely open process. I know we have people from the party here today. They were part of that process of the validation. We had a team that busted their hump. And what I would tell this board and what I would tell the public at large is, if you don't like us waiting a week to get those final results, there's a solution, and it's to go back and change the statute. There's nothing this board can do. There's nothing Ms. Ross, there's nothing Ms. Lewis, there's nothing that the county can do to fix that. That is the election system as designed by our state legislature. And with that, that's the conclusion of my report, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
No, thank you very much. Are there any questions from the board?
I have something I want to add.
Go ahead, Supervisor Miller.
Actually, this is Supervisor Sturdy.
Oh, well, you got...
And I don't really want to
Go ahead.
And I'm hearing a delay. So I don't really want to discuss it now, but there were some other issues possibly that I want to have my staff meet with Mr. Volkmer and Virginia Ross, considering overvoting and undervoting, that the machines may have been switched off and these were not registering at all. And we don't know how that affected the count. So I just want that to be out there.
Can you address that?
Chair, Vice Chair, that's news to me. That's not been reported. We did do our hand count validation or verification afterwards. It matched up. I think there was a very slight variation, but it was 1. Which is well within the margin of error that is acceptable. So every protection that was in place has caught everything. Everything would suggest that there has been no irregularities. However, I believe that we are more than willing to do an after-vote analysis. I think, I don't want to call it an investigation, but to look at things and to be able to report back. I don't think that this should be dead. I know that the public has demanded at various meetings that, hey, this shouldn't be the end of it. Again, there was the issue with the poll pad. I don't think we can forget about that until 2024 and then hope that it just miraculously clears up when we have a presidential election. So there will be, I think, some after-action items that we are more than willing with the board's support to look into. If there are issues, I would encourage that those be relayed to us, and we'll do everything we can to investigate those and fully report. Again, there have been here and there reports. Each time those reports have been provided to us, we've done our best to investigate and either substantiate and validate or figure out what's going on. For example, the poll pad issue, we're still in the process of trying to figure out. There was somebody that believed that their preferred candidate's name wasn't listed. We were able to do everything we could to investigate that, and it appears that maybe they were just mistaken. But as those things come, we are certainly being as open and as transparent as possible. We work great with both the Elections Department and the Recorder's Office. We want to give every confidence in the world to the public. I can tell you that I am incredibly confident as I could possibly be, in that in the numbers that are being provided to this board. I don't believe there was anything nefarious. I think we've been open, we've been transparent, we've had great participation by both parties, by non-parties, by volunteers, by county employees, by the board, the elections department. This has been a Herculean effort where everybody's rowed in the same direction. As a result, I can tell you unequivocally Pinal County's elections are safe, secure, and this is a valid canvas that's being presented. But I know that. Now I think our responsibility is to create that same sort of faith in our community at large. And Supervisor Surdy, if there are additional issues, I would encourage you or your staff to let me know, and I would make that same offer to any of the board. If there are issues, let us know, and we will continue to work and provide some after-action reports.
Okay, very good.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
we'll be reaching out to you.
Okay, Supervisor Kavanaugh, you had a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do you recall which precincts had the poll pad malfunction?
It was a smattering of, it wasn't just one. There were several that had it. I believe 98 had approximately 17 people. For whatever reason, that was the largest impacted, but it wasn't limited to just one precinct.
When an issue comes up with a poll pad or other electronic device and an IT person is called to help, is there a record made of that request?
Yes.
What does that look like?
So in this case, every one of those calls ended up going to the recorder's office. So we have a call log of every call that was made to the recorder's office. I believe in some there were about 700 calls that were made to the recorder's office, and then there is a summary, a brief summation of what the issue that the call was regarding was made. That's why I said it was about 100. We tried to look and just get a real kind of rough feel for it, but it appears that number was roughly 100. There's also green tickets that are given that we can look at as well.
Okay, and I know you've covered a prior meeting, but somebody delivered a couple of affidavits saying their chosen candidate was not on the ballot. Could you just briefly, as a reminder to the public, tell us what you did to resolve that?
Absolutely. So the first thing we did is we actually went back to Runbeck, who is our provider, and we looked at every ballot proof that was sent to them. Remember, it's not like there's 3 ballots. Each precinct has multiple ballots. That, in particular case, there were 2 different ballot styles. So we went to Runbeck and said, we want to see what we sent to you. We looked at and saw what was there, and then what they received. They gave us a copy of that. And then we had approximately almost 4,000 extra ballots that were uncast, including ballots that when they come in a packet, and they are essentially shrink-wrapped or they're sealed. In order to hand those ballots to voters that are voting the day of, those shrink-wrap packages have to be opened. They have to be pulled out and they have to be provided. So we went through, and I had a sworn AZ Post certified officer. One happened to be a Republican, one happened to be a Democrat. We made sure of it. We had them go out and look at every open container and spot check those, and we had them look at even the unopened shrink wrapped. They looked at approximately 2,000 uncast ballots to look and see if that candidate's name was specifically included. What happened, what the allegation is that the race was there. And there were 3 candidates for 2 slots. There were 2 Republicans and 1 Democrat. The affidavit said that the preferred Republican, which was one of the 2, that person's name was not included on my affidavit. There was 1 Republican and 1 Democrat, but not the 3rd name. So we had on each ballot them look at every single ballot specifically just at that race, and they went through and they spot checked each one. They did write an official report saying this is what we did, this is the process we went through. Again, when we checked with Runbeck, we checked what was in our system. There was not a second ballot that mirrored that. And when we conferred with Runbeck said there's no way that one ballot would just not print that one race because everything's lined up accordingly, and it would have just screwed everything up, the margins, all of that. So Runbeck said there's no way that could have happened, and then we saw not a second replicant of that alleged defective ballot.
Very good.
Very good. Okay. Any other questions from the board? Hearing none. Thank you very much, Mr. Volkmer. Okay. Item 2 is discussion, approval, disapproval of the canvass of the election official results of the November 8, 2022 general election. Ms. Ross, you are back. Actually, you never left.
Thank you, Chairman, Vice Chair, Supervisors. Virginia Ross, Elections Director. The canvass has been compiled, and I stand by the results of the canvass and all of the reports that are attached to the canvass, that they are the correct and true reports of the election and the tabulation, and ask that you approve as presented.
Very well. Are there any questions from the board?
I have questions, Supervisor Surdy.
Supervisor Surdy, go ahead.
So Kent Volkmer, of course, a lot of news coming out of Cochise County. Do you have some idea about why they are saying they're not going to canvass and certify? And I'm sitting in front of my desktop now, and about every 5 minutes, I'm getting emails asking us to not certify. So can you give us an idea of what you've heard Cochise County is planning on doing?
Mr. Volkmer.
Chair, Vice Chair, members of the board, Kent Volkmer, Pinal County Attorney. Essentially, at this point, it's just rumors and innuendo. They had a meeting just like today's meeting late last week. The board voted to delay until the 28th. I think there's some concerns potentially about their machines. I believe they've demanded that they want to see the certification documentation before they end up canvassing. If you recall, about 6 weeks ago, give or take, I showed you sort of those various documents. I think that's what they're looking for before they canvass. My understanding is ultimately if they don't canvass, the Secretary of State's office is inclined to end up filing essentially a lawsuit that forces you to do your job. That there's the ability of the public to actually file what's called a mandamus action. And a mandamus action is saying, hey, you're a government official. You have a very specific obligation. You're not doing your job, so we're going to file something and tell the court to do your job or face essentially contempt of court. My understanding is the Secretary of State's office may be exploring that if they choose not to canvass. But I know that the same documentation that was provided to you is available, so I would anticipate on the 28th, which is the last day by law that the canvass can occur. I believe that information is going to be presented, and we'll have to see where the chips fall, so to speak.
I did hear on the radio this morning Corey Lorick talking to state elections director saying that their machines are federally and state certified, so there's really not a problem there.
She actually, pardon me, Chair, she actually appeared virtually at that board meeting and told them the same thing, that we have all certifications, everything's been there, that the National Certification Board, everything was there. If you remember, part of the issue lies on that. It says that the expiration is X date, and then there was a short gap before they sent sort of an email saying, hey, we're still in the process, we're still dealing with these issues, but they're still certified. If you look online, it's still certified. So she has essentially made an avowal to them that, look, these are completely legal machines, they're certified, they're in compliance with both state law and federal law. My understanding is the board basically said, okay, prove it. And that's what the 28th is scheduled for.
Okay. Would you please explain the statute regarding canvass and our obligation? For the public's sake.
Chris is helping me out. He's bringing the actual statutory language up.
And also the ramifications of what happens afterwards and what this sets up.
Right. So I am quoting the elections manual. Quote, the Board of Supervisors has a non-discretionary duty to canvass the returns as provided by the county recorder or other officer in charge of elections and has no authority to change vote totals or reject the election results. So it is what's called ministerial duty. You don't have the ability to say no. If you do, there's going to be a lawsuit. That mandamus are going to come in. They're going to tell you you're going to have to go ahead and do what your statutory obligation is. The court will force you to do it. And the issue is the reason we have to have the canvass is the votes are not official. You know, there was a lady that spoke and was concerned about, hey, we have all of these people conceding and we don't know what the official results are. Well, we have to canvass, send it to the Secretary of State so they bring all of the canvasses together. That's what's going to trigger the recount that you heard Ms. Ross speak about earlier. That's what's going to trigger the ability if anybody wants to initiate a lawsuit. You have to have that canvass. That's that line in the sand saying, okay, our elections are now complete. These are the results. You're not blessing them. You're not saying that you love them. What you're saying is this is what was presented to us, and our obligation, legal obligation, is to canvass these results, and that's what today is really about.
That's the statute.
Yeah, thank you. It's actually ARS 16646. C in particular, and again, it says shall. It's not discretionary.
Very well, thank you.
Chairman McClure.
Supervisor Surdy.
So as you know, we're the sounding board to the public, and a lot of times they do not know what's going on. So we're also being asked that if Maricopa County cannot certify theirs because they're still got a lot of, anomalies going on down there, that we shouldn't either. But nothing that they do is going to affect what we've already done. Ours is done and finished, and we think it's secure. So I just want the people to know that Maricopa County is not affecting Pinal County at this point. And is that correct, Mr. Volkmer?
Chair and Vice Chair, that's absolutely accurate. We have no control over what Cochise or Apache or La Paz or Pima or Maricopa or anybody else does. The canvassing has nothing to do with that. You are doing your statutory responsibility as the Pinal County Board of Supervisors. Each Board of Supervisors has that same responsibility, and then all of those totals come together. So there's no benefit in you delaying it, and just because you don't like what somebody else did or you think somebody else has issues, that should play no bearing, because, again, this is that ministerial duty. There is an obligation that you canvass our results. For today's purpose, you are looking only at Pinal County today.
Does that satisfy you, sir? Mr. Surdy, Supervisor?
It does. No further questions.
Very well. Are there any other questions from the board? Seeing none, hearing none, I'd ask for a motion, please.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we approve item number 2 as presented.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Thank you very much. Item number 3 is discussion, approval, disapproval of the second clarification of resolution number 082620-ED, a resolution of the Board of Supervisors of Pinal County approving the fee schedule and election worker pay for the Pinal County Elections Department, recorded on August 27, 2020. And Ms. Roll, you are up.
Thank you. Jerry Roll, on assignment in the Elections Department. So because we are going to have a recount, we were going to need a board to count, to tabulate. And we felt that the early board would be a good vehicle, a good tool to use for the recount. We don't really have staff to do it ourselves, and this board is an independent board. It is made up of bipartisan members. They've worked well together throughout, and we needed some way to pay them. And we didn't have a mechanism, so we're asking you to approve this mechanism so that we can pay them when we bring them in for the recount.
So we're building the machine as we speak. Are there any questions from the board? Hearing none, I'd ask for a motion, please.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve item number 3 as presented.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none. Sounds like the Navy in here. Okay. Very well. Thank you. Motion passes. Okay. Aye. Okay. Item 4 is consent items. All items indicated by an asterisk will be handled by a single vote as part of the consent agenda unless a board member, county manager, or member of the public objects at the time the agenda item is called. We have all of one item in the consent. And does anyone care to pull any items from the consent agenda? Seeing and hearing none, I would ask for a motion, please.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we approve item number A as presented.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There we go. I have a motion and a second. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
There we go. Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Thank you. This meeting is adjourned.